We've got Anthony Ballard here with us, is a nuisance species biologist, and it can't be a bigger nuisance species than hogs right now as they continue to wreak havoc. And we finish up Predator and Habitat Month with you, Anthony. Thanks for being here.
All right, no problem. Glad to be here.
So flooding is happening right now, and this obviously is given could be given a little bit of an advantage to people trying to manage and trap hogs, right?
It can. This year, Law Enforcement Bureau is starting to gear up to get on the water, and people are more thinking about fishing and fishing, boating, getting on the water, that kind of thing. And it's important, as a manager of your property, as a manager of your land, to always think about that critter that you're trying to manage for, or in this case, manage against, what they're going through on your property. And so, right now it's like you said, there's a lot of water everywhere you go. That can be a double-edged sword as far as wild hog management, but you can make it work to your advantage. And so, you got to consider right now there's so much water. There's a lot less space, dry ground. There's a lot less space to actually go be a hog.
Right.
And then there's also less food because we're not quite to that spring green up yet. We hadn't quite gotten to those food resources being available. And at the same time, we're just on kind of the waning end of the acorn production, and of course there's not much ag going on, and so it's a tough time to be an animal this time of year in general, but particularly when the water comes in, it makes those food resources that much more strained. And so from a trapping perspective, we talked about not being able to shoot them, but you can trap on private lands, and it makes it that much easier this time of the year to get them on bait because there's so little else that they can go utilize. Most people have pulled their supplemental feed stands or tripods or whatever it is off of their property this time of year, and so there's a lot less food than there was a month ago, and so you can use that to your advantage to get them on bait.
Many times hogs follow receding water. Is that true?
Yes, we've seen it on our WMAs. As people know, a lot of our WMAs have waterfowl impoundments where
Sure.
we keep and hold water, and during the summer months or whenever it is that we take those off, they vary. But whenever that water comes down, the water when it comes down and that ground that gets exposed, that mud. Number one, it's usually pretty rich in invertebrates and roots and tubers, that sort of thing from aquatic vegetation. And it's also easy to root up because the water's just come off and it's been soft there and it's been muddy for however long that water has been there. And so a lot of times what you'll see is hogs will actually follow that line because essentially it's exposing food that hasn't been there, that hasn't been available to them for some time. And then all of a sudden it's being exposed, and so they utilize that, particularly these times of year.
And we we're dealing with this, and obviously this, I guess it could be bad too, right, with flooding, because that can force hogs into new areas, right? Yeah,
it can. A lot of times when I talk to, I do private land visits or just talk to people in passing or whatever it is that own land. A lot of times what I see is they're close to river drainages or places where water fluctuates a lot, and then they'll have a large flooding event where the water goes way outside where it normally would be, and those hogs that may have been on somebody else's property that they didn't even know about are all of a sudden on their property. And sometimes they decide they like it, and they set up shop, and now he has a brand new problem. And sometimes they follow that water line back down and they never see them again. So, but the main take-home point there is to make sure that you're being vigilant on your property, especially this times of year in these high water events. If you can access your property safely, obviously, to make sure that you're looking out for those warning signs, that rooting or actual seeing wild hogs or whatever it is, to make sure that you don't have a problem that you didn't even know about. And to act accordingly if you do see those kind of warning signs.
Anthony Ballard here with us with the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. It's Predator and Habitat Management Month. We're talking about wild hogs. Obviously, this month the department emphasizes predator and habitat management, and wild hogs fit right into that because they're probably, I would say, at the top of the list, aren't they?
Well, as far as a predator, when we think of predators, we think about sharks and lions and, the big charismatic species that that take down large animals on the Serengeti or whatever it is. But the definition of a predator is an organism that primarily obtains food by killing and consuming other organisms. Okay, that's a pretty straightforward definition. And so wild hogs consume about 90% plant material, but then the other 10% is could be live or dead terrestrial organisms. And so but the biggest thing to take home there is they consume such a wide variety of different species that they fit the definition of predator very well, and are particularly destructive because of that.
And they can be, like you said. I mean, anything they'll kill and eat a fawn, won't they?
They'll kill and eat a fawn. They'll kill and eat. We're coming up on turkey season. They'll predate on turkey eggs. If it's alligator eggs, alligator nest in the marsh. There's been a lot of research down in South Louisiana and marshes of Mississippi. They'll predate on those. Even down on the coast, sea turtle eggs, they have no problem rooting up a sea turtle egg and eating every single one. And so, nest predation, they've been shown to actually reduce the diversity or the species richness, basically the number of species that occur in a particular area of reptile and amphibian species in particular areas, especially when that's the main resource. And that's another thing to keep in mind. Wild hogs are going to eat whatever is the most readily available and whatever they can find easily and get into their gut. And so if that's a bunch of snakes or a large amount of frogs or whatever it is, then that's number one on the menu. And so it can be one of many different things that can cause ecological impacts.
A couple of questions from the C-Spired text line. JT asked why they closed the feeding in Lafayette County with no confirmed cases. Bruce. That was part of the zone, wasn't it?
Yeah, that'd be coming from the Panola County positive deer and the other positives in Marshall and
right.
Tate.
Yeah, that whole zone up there.
By.
So
yeah.
He's correct in that we don't have any in Lafayette proper, but that zone extends beyond
25-mile zone there.
That's right.
Is there a season for trapping and hunting coyotes? Abundance around my farm, getting closer to the house.
Coyotes are a nuisance, considered a nuisance species, just like wild hogs. So it's pretty much wide open year-round to get them.
Okay. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Has there been a recorded incident of someone's house or yard dog contracting CWD from eating the waste of deer that feed around the edges of yards?
Not to my knowledge. I've not heard anything about a dog getting that. Have you, Anthony?
I haven't heard. Now, see, the distinction is there's experimental infections, and then there's infections that people have actually witnessed in the wild, and that can be very different. There's been a lot of animals that have been experimentally infected that have never been recorded in a wild situation. And so, as far as I know, dogs, coyotes, vultures, and those sorts of things will be considered a pass-through host. That means they can consume that prion. They're going to pass it through their system, but they're not going to become infected and actually start to amplify and pass that disease along. It's just going to basically pass through their body and end up wherever it ends up.
No doubt about it. Thomas says, since deer season over, can I hunt hogs at night with a rifle and a light, or will I get a night hunting ticket for it? I mean, you can hunt.
Yeah, you can get after it.
You can do it during deer season if you want to.
Day, night, wherever, just on private land.
Just to go out and stay up all night, get them all you want.
They pull up a Google Maps and make sure you're familiar with your property, because things at night don't look the same as things in the daytime, so you want to make sure you're doing that safely, but it is legal.
Let's see, how would someone get their name out that is set up to hunt with thermals to farmers that have predator and hog problems? I presume that's what you want, that you're one of these people that want to do that. You can hunt hogs with a thermal.
Mm-hmm. You can.
Yeah.
Right. Now, as far as the marketing aspect of his personal endeavor, I have no idea.
Go to social media, I guess. I don't know what else to tell you. We had a question coming across earlier about why you can't hunt hogs during the off-season on the WMA. Good question out there.
Right. So the regulations are on private land, it's pretty much no holds barred. On WMAs, you can only harvest wild hogs within species within game seasons that are open and with the weapons and calibers that are legal for that particular season. And so the reason for that, as we've kind of alluded to before, as I've alluded to before on the program, is trapping is the best technology that we have right now to reduce hog populations on a large scale. And so, like I talked about before, this time of the year being so good for hog trapping, this is the time that we really try to make some hay on our wildlife management areas. And the more pressured hogs are from human activities, the more likely they're going to be, or the more difficult they are to trap. And the more they move around, the less they start to trust traps, and it really sets back our management objectives to trap this time of year if we were to open it up and have a large hunting presence trying to harvest wild hogs via firearm.
And there's no doubt about it. I mean, trapping is the way to go. It's the most effective way to control, let me say, to manage a wild hog population. But it is definitely there. JT, what about the new turkey tagging system? Is it mandatory? How do we get the tags? Adam?
Yes, it is mandatory, and there's not tags as you may be familiar with if you've hunted out of state. So you have to report your turkey harvest through our game check system by 10 p.m. on the day in which it occurs. There's 3 ways to report. You can download the MDWFP Hunt Fish smartphone app. You can log on to the website, mdwfp.com/gamecheck, or you can call the 1-800-BE-SMART number. Of those 3, we're recommending to hunters who have a iPhone or Android phone to download the app and use that. So there's not actually a tag that you're putting on the turkey. You have to report, though, and that app will pretty much do everything you need it to do right there in the field, even if you don't have cell coverage.
Back to you. We're talking about hogs and how they affect the quality of a landowner's habitat. They can destroy it, and they can do it really quick, can't they?
And they can. Let's see. Yeah, so the reason that wild hogs are so damaging is because of the scope in which they affect the habitat that they live. And so all the way from a microbial perspective, influencing the moisture in the soil, the species composition of the plants after destruction, after rooting in the ground, all the way up to direct predation of, like I said before, reptiles, amphibians, even deer fawns and turkey eggs and that sort of thing. Those more superficial things, direct predation on the landscape is the things that people tend to think about, and then also, obviously agricultural impact. But even those smaller things that they do, affecting the species composition and those smaller scale things that people don't necessarily realize makes for a habitat or an ecosystem that doesn't function properly from the ground up with the presence of wild hogs there.
Someone said, Mike says, is wild hog meat good tasting? Smaller hogs pretty good.
Smaller hogs are pretty good, and we, I've covered I try to cover it every time I come on. Proper care, proper protection whenever you decide to eat wild hogs. They do carry many diseases that can be passed on to people, and so if you do make the decision to harvest and to consume a wild hog, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you want to make sure you're wearing rubber gloves, make sure you sterilize your equipment after you're done, clean the space that you're using to butcher that hog. Freezing does not kill most of the diseases that can be transmitted to you, and so you want to make sure that I would invest, go to the store and spend $10 and get a meat thermometer. Make sure that meat is to 165 degrees, and once you get it to that and you've handled that meat properly, you have very, very low chance that you can contract anything from there.
And there you go.
And that's nothing new, right? That thing's been nasty for a long time.
Well, it's because they'll eat anything.
Right.
I mean, they eat anything. They'll eat themselves if they wanted to, I'm sure.
They do. They do eat. Hogs
nasty,
will eat
man.
more dead hogs. But, another thing is that pig, that genus or that species is just capable of carrying and transmitting a lot more diseases than a lot of our other native species. And so that's the reason why it's such a concern, is because for whatever reason, the way they're made just makes them capable of transmitting so many more diseases and parasites and so forth than a lot of our native game species.
Well, it's a good idea no matter what wild animal you're using to use rubber gloves and sterilize everything after you're done anyway, and just get into the habit of that. All right, what are some of the ecological benefits of trapping right now this time of year? We got to get her in another gear. Let's go.
All right. So, like I said, they're easier to trap because the food resources are low. and you can get them on that bait quicker. You reduce direct predation, deer fawns and turkey eggs and all that. That's going to be on the landscape here very soon, and also that there's wild hogs can breed twice a year, but one of those pulses in reproduction that we see is kind of during this part of the season, now through about April, that we see on our WMAs when we're trapping. We see a lot higher prevalence of pregnant sows, and so if you can get that sow off the landscape before it gives that drops that litter of 12 on the ground, that's going to be you're going to be multiplying your effort there.
Sure. And let's go. If you want to trap in a CWD management zone, you got to get a permit. You can go to the website. It's real easy. License and permits, wildlife permits, animal control permits under statewide permits. And you need a license to hunt or trap hogs on private lands, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to have a license, and we want to emphasize the CWD permitting process because you can't put any bait out. But if you get a permit, we're wanting to help the landowners control the hog population, and they're specific in the area that you can put the bait on the ground. But you can do it in a CWD zone if you get a permit.
Yeah, but you got to make sure you have that permit and do that as well. Do we have? This is my question for you. Do we have commercial trappers that come in and help people here in Mississippi control hogs?
Particularly in the Delta, we have a lot of people that will run multiple traps, dozens of traps in different landowners, and do that as a service. Yeah.
All right, real quick. If you're trapping, I know there's some regulations too. We need to touch on that real quick about what you have to do with a trap, like when you check it, those different types of things. Some trapping laws there.
Right. So just a few friendly reminders. Your trap does have to be checked every 36 hours. That's mandated by law. The roof on that trap, make sure it is not fully enclosed. That's to allow the escape of non-target animals. At least 50% of the roof has to be open. The trap must be labeled with the information of the trapper, so the personal information, name, address, so forth, or the customer ID. And then we talked about before if you're running dogs for wild hogs, you cannot do it during spring turkey season. And so just try to throw a couple of those out there to jog people's memory if they're just now getting the hog trapping going after deer season here, to remember to abide by those regulations.
All right, we want folks to make sure they do that. All right, now what's this Operation Hog? Give me an update on that.
Right, so the last time I was on this show was in December, and we had so basically what Operation Hog is an education campaign. We've partnered with USDA Wildlife Services, Mississippi State Extension Service, and Department of Agriculture. We had 68 locations in 32 counties. We now have 134 locations in 70 counties. We're looking to go statewide and have a lot more media and presence and stuff, educate people about wild hogs.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate you being here with us today and getting us up to date. That was Anthony Ballard. He's the nuisance species biologist. Thank you very much.